cover a lot because seed saving is not a 1 hour talk. It is a lifetime of work, and I'm have a nice presentation. I hope you enjoy it, and I will answer any questions that I am able, and so I'll get started now. Let me see, here it is. I'm new at this, so bear with me. I can't get to my slideshow. There we go. There we go. I got it figured out now. So seeds are our life. They're our ancestors, and they're our food. So if I can find out how to advance it, I'll have it made. Sorry about this, folks. I'm new at using these. Let me see if I can get it. Any advice, Caitlin?
Either clicking on the slide or using the arrows on your keyboard should work.
Oh, okay, right? Thank you.
You can try a couple things.
We'll see. There we go. Thank you.
Yay, of course.
Seeds provide food security and sovereignty and self-determination. Local seed stewardship is important because it's a step on the path to reclaim our cultural seed and food sovereignty. And it establishes a community and local seed shed, which is really important in these times of having climate change and needing our food and our seeds to be adaptable. You need to consider where your seed comes from, who produces it, and how it's grown. Even organic seed is not necessarily organic because it may have been grown organically, but the seed hasn't been bred under organic circumstances. So all of that carries down generation to generation in the seeds that you use. Heirloom varieties are becoming harder to find. Companies are no longer investing in keeping those out in the marketplace for people to buy, because when they leave that common market and are no longer in use, then they can patent them and own them. It allows the traits that you want, the colors that you want, the flavors that you want, your favorite plant, to be able to work with that plant and have it adapt to your soil, adapt to your environment, and be diverse. But you get to pick for the traits that you like in the seeds that you save. And for generations, indigenous people, gardeners, and farmers have saved seed long before first contact. There were trade routes where tribes traded seeds. They traded all the way down to Mexico and back up to here, which is how we have those wonderful peppers and some of the tobacco that we have. So it's been going on a long time. All of our ancestors did it. And it's a relationship between plants and humans. You agree to take care of the earth and provide something for the plants, and they agree to provide you with food and seed going forward for our future. So it's this dance that we do with the plants. And now to try and talk about what types of seeds there are, because it can be a little confusing between heirlooms and GMO and organic and F1 hybrids. So open pollinated seeds. They're not hybrid, and they just naturally pollinate with each other. And as long as the pollen's not mixed between the crop plants of the same species. For example, squash, winter squash, there's 4 different types of squash: Peppo, Maxima, Cucurbit, and Moschata. And you can have 2 different kinds of Moschata squash that you're growing, and they will cross-pollinate with each other. But if it's a Peppo and a Maxima, you can grow them side by side and they won't cross-pollinate with each other. So you have to kind of watch which kind of squash you're growing where. Hybrid seeds are not GMOs. So many people ask me about, hybrids, they're GMO. What is a GMO? What isn't? They're just offspring of a cross between 2 parents, and that seed produces an offspring. But if you take seed from that offspring and plant it, it won't necessarily reproduce with the same thing. You'll get genes from either of the parents. It can pop up and be anything and everything out of its genetic background. It won't produce true to type. That F1 means it's first generation. It's those 2 parents mixed together consistently produce that offspring, but from there forward, it hasn't been grown out to stabilize that enough generations so that you can save the seeds. So if your seeds say F1, don't even try and save the seeds. Unless you want to play and find out what comes up interesting. Sometimes you can get some really neat plants when you do that. Heirloom is a plant variety that has a history of being passed down in a family or a community. A lot of your seed catalogs that give some history will say it was in a seed catalog in the 1800s or the 1930s. That means that that plant has produced true to type for generations, and that it's open pollinated, that if you save the seed from that it will produce the same type of plant from that seed. Organically grown seed, the seeds that are grown in organic conditions. Organically bred seed, and here's where the difference is. Seeds bred within organic conditions and then grown within organic conditions. There's a lot of your companies will sell organic seed, but your bigger companies have been growing those parent plants to produce the seeds that they then grow for organic seeds in contaminated or big commercial chemical and standardized agriculture that uses a lot of soil inputs. And so you need to know where your seed comes from. Locally or regionally grown. The ones that are grown in your neighborhood, in your community, whatever you consider a local region. And that helps the seeds grow year to year with your climate conditions and with your soil conditions. And those living plants will adapt to those changes over time. So it's really important that we start breeding our seeds and sourcing our seeds locally so that they have a chance to adapt to the changes that we're seeing in the climate now. GMO seeds that have had their genetic makeup altered by replacing gene sequences, either through agrobacterium or virus, or being spliced with genes from different species to obtain desirable traits. And common GMO seed crops are corn, soy, cotton, granola, and sugar beets. And they're starting to come out with tomatoes and several other crops now that are being genetically modified. And once they're done with that by that company, they generally will patent that, and you can't, it's against the law to save the seed from that and grow your own or give it away, because they own that seed and they are the only ones that have a right to sell it. And there seems to be something a little crooked in that for me with it. It doesn't seem to be, you can't own the plants, they're living beings. Okay. I get asked this, how do I know where to get good clean seeds? Well, there are a lot of lists out there that of trusted seed companies. And I believe Erica printed up a bunch of handouts that I had sent her that has been passed out in the community there. And she said she was going to print up some more. So all of those are available if you get a hold of Erica or Caitlin. I had a list of seed companies. Are they heirloom? Are your seeds GMO? I don't want to get a GMO. I hear that all the time. Better questions you should ask are, where do your seeds come from? Are they locally grown? Are they organic? Are they treated with a pesticide? Or is it GMO free? And if they're locally grown and sourced, then from seed swaps or local growers, build that relationship. Don't be afraid to ask them these questions. Where did you get your seed? Find out about the seeds. Find out about the grower who's growing them and how they're growing them. And there's this cycle to saving seeds. You start with your planting your seeds, and then you get the opportunity through the course of this, while they're growing, you rogue your unwanted plants, the ones that are getting diseases, the ones that are growing funny, or the ones that just don't look like they're thriving well in the environment. Well, you pull those. You have to make sure that if you are dealing with crops that are wind pollinated or can cross pollinate, what they call outcrossers, that you keep the proper isolation distance so that you don't have cross pollination between them. Then when they get mature, you're still watching them. You're always watching the growing conditions and the weather conditions and any signs of stress or disease in the plants. Take those out. When they get mature, you harvest the seeds only from the best plants. We have a saying that says, save the best and eat the rest. So you save the seeds from the best, the healthiest, the ones that show the traits that you like the best, the colors of the fruit the best, and the ones that don't have those traits, then you throw them on your table and eat them. Then you come to seed cleaning and drying, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation with some equipment that you might need. And then seed storage, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Mating systems in plants. We have inbreeding or self-pollinating plants. They have what's called perfect flowers, which is they have all of the parts, male and female, within the same flower to reproduce. They don't need another plant. They don't need another flower on the plant. Generally, they're small, like tomato flowers or the flowers on the pepper plant that you get. And they get all of their genes from one parent. They don't need two different parents. There's generally less genetic diversity, but they're well adapted. They adapt well to producing consistently. And rice, wheat, tomatoes, peas, soy, all of those are self-pollinating. Beans, as well are self-pollinating. And we used to include peppers in that list, another nightshade, but peppers like to party and can be a little promiscuous, and you can get some cross-pollination, especially if you have a lot of bees and insect activity within your plants. Outcrossers get cross-pollination. They have imperfect flowers. They generally have a male and a female flower on the same plant. They have big, showy flowers like your big squash blossoms, and they have a wonderful smell to attract the insects to help pollinate them. And the offspring are a mixture of both parents from plants, because your bees will go from one squash plant on a male flower to a female on another plant. And so, and they have a lot more genetic diversity and can change and adapt with environments. Squash, corn, cabbage, beets. Squash and corn are generally, you have to be a little more careful because they are also wind pollinated. And so there's a much bigger isolation distance with those. Okay, you must be able to grow your plants from seed to flowering and then maturity. So you have to pick crops that will do that within your growing season. Carrots are hard to do here, beets, because they're biannual. They grow the carrot the first year, and then the second year they grow the seed. Your beans and peas are good ones because generally they can grow up here. Long squash can be funny. You have to pick a shorter season squash or one that is adapted to this area so that you have them blooming at the right time and you don't get nipped with frost either early or late, like last year with the late hard freeze that we had. And sulfurs will cross-pollinate. So you need to really learn about what plants you want to save seed from and develop that relationship with that plant. Learn about that plant, about its growing length, its bloom time, its feeding needs, its soil needs. Daylight, onions can be daylight specific, and sometimes they'll bolt on you and go the first year. Outcrossers, they use the pollen of another plant to reproduce. Corn, brassicas, certain cucumbers, watermelons, and certain varieties of winter squash will all cross-pollinate with each other. So you have to keep that in mind and know what you're planting where and what variety it is. In general, an outcrosser needs to be at least a quarter mile or more from other varieties of that crop. There are some things you can do if you don't have that kind of space, and I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. They say with squash, it can be up to 2.5 to 3 miles because of the bee population and the insect pollination as well. You can only grow one variety of that type of plant to produce seed. You can grow all the ones you want but if you're gonna grow one for seed, then you need to make sure that that's the only one of that type that you're growing. And another option is instead of the isolation distance, you can use barriers. There are netting that you can put over them. You can also, especially with corn, use planting time. Planting, if you know how long it takes before it tassels and gets ears, then you can plant it at a different time, not at the same time your neighbor or another variety that you're growing, with about 2 weeks difference in there so that they don't bloom at the same time and don't cross that way. Good crops for people who have never saved seed are selfers, tomatoes, beans, lettuce, peas. But tomatoes, even if you plant two different tomato plants, two different varieties side by side, right next to each other, they will cross up. So you have to keep that in mind when you're planning your garden as well. Crossers, summer squash, cucumbers, radishes, and all of your Asian greens that you'll have to pay attention to. Isolation distance or bloom time. It sounds like a lot, but it can be very simple, depends on what you want. We have onions, and they're a biannual. Bees and other insects can cross with them. In that information that Erica has, there are some charts that can do that. At the end, I'll show you a couple of books that you can get that will help with that will give you isolation, different distances, and different how many plants you need for what type of thing you're doing. Decide what you want to do. Are you just growing seed for your own garden? Are you growing stock seed to have for your whole community? Are you going to play with becoming a plant breeder to see what kind of interesting plants you can get up to? Isolation by space. Crossing species need to isolate from anywhere from 500 feet to a mile to 2.5 miles. You can separate them by forest and tree stands, which prevents the wind carrying the pollen. You can put them in different fields that far away. You can use hand pollination for squash, even for corn. You can use the netting that I talked about. You can use these little things here. They're called blossom bags. And so if you've got a lot of tomatoes and you're only saving seed just for your own household, or maybe you and a couple other friends, you only need 2 or 3 tomatoes. So when that bloom starts to form, you slip that little net bag on there and pull the string up on it, and that keeps all the insects out of there or any pollen from growing over to it. And then when the tomatoes form, then you can take that bag off, and then you mark that branch with a piece of yarn or construction tape or something, so you remember which branch it was that you pollinated. I have forgotten to mark them and then didn't know which ones it was. Corn tassels. There are what they call tassel bags that you put over the corn tassels just before they're ready to drop the pollen. And each of those tassels drops millions of pollen grains when they finally open up. And each one of these little silks has to receive a grain of pollen to form a kernel on the ear. Every one of these goes to one kernel spot on that ear shoot, which is why sometimes you'll open an ear of corn and you'll wind up, there'll be places where there's no kernels at. Well, that little strand of silk didn't get a granule of pollen. And on the ear shoots, they have bags, and you know the restaurant paper bags that the silverware comes in? They look just like that. We call them corn condoms, only they're waxed to be moisture resistant and not let water into them, and they can be, but they're breathable to keep from molding. And you slip those over the silks, and you put the bag over the tassel, and then when you're ready to pollinate, you take the bag of pollen off of the tassel, pull the little bag off of the corn ear, and stick it into that bag of pollen and shake it around, and then you put that little corn condom back on it, and you leave it on until the corn has grown up out of the bag, or until harvest time. With squash and the imperfect flowers, very often I get asked, how do you tell the difference between a male and female flower on a squash? The one on the left is the male flower. It grows on the top of a long stem that goes away from the plant. The one on the right is the female, and below the flower will be a little tiny baby squash, whether it be round or long like a zucchini. And that's the easiest way as you look. And oh, there's the fruit underneath, and there's the male flower. And with those, you would take a clothespin or tape and tape up the blossoms so the bees can't get in there. And the same thing on the male flower. And then the next morning before the bees get really active, but while it's dry, you would take that male flower and stick it down inside the female flower and put the pollen in there, and then close it back up and mark it and wait till the blossom falls off. Then you've got a hand pollinated squash. But it does take going out every evening and seeing which blossom is ready, and every morning before the bees get really active, but after the dew is drying off. Isolating by timing. You plant your first planting of corn, and then 2 to 4 weeks later, you plant your second, and then a third one that's just sprouting when your second one is flowering, so that they're 2 to 4 weeks apart. But again, plants are living beings, and sometimes they send messages through the ground, and all of a sudden your 2-week planting is going to get ripe at the same time as your first planting, and the third one's catching up really quick. Nature is always unpredictable and fun. Here is some of the netting that you can put on for your, put it on one type and let it pollinate. And then a couple of days later, you put it on the other one, and that keeps the insects from getting in your pepper plants. These are peppers here, and cross-pollinating between the varieties. When to harvest. Dry-seeded crops like brassicas and beans and grains and sunflowers. The fruit will begin to dry and turn brown when the seeds are mature. You know, all the petals fall off your sunflowers, and brassicas get, like broccoli, gets a little thin seed pod on it, and it'll start to dry out. And if you're not watching it, all of a sudden you'll go out there and it will have popped open and your seeds will all be gone. So you have to keep an eye on them to know, watch for when they're ready. Wet seeded crops like squash, tomatoes, peppers, they're usually ripe when it's time to eat them, when they turn their best color, when they're ready to be eaten. And that's when you would take, and as you're eating them, save the seeds out of them. You don't have to do it all right at once. When you cut that tomato, then you save the seeds. You put them in a little jar and save those. Squashes are also wet seeded, but you don't have to let them ferment. You just rinse the outer shell off of them. The plants for dry seeded crops, you want your beans and things to leave them on the plant as long as possible before it's ready. Let them start to dry literally on the living plant. And then you can, if you're going to have frost or the weather is turning cold, you can pull up the plant and hang it upside down so that it finishes drying, because those seeds will pull the last of the energy out of that plant into the seed formation. And then you take and clean them in screens, and I have some here I'm going to show you. Each type of seed has a different storage life. Generally, the smaller the seed, the shorter the storage life. You can extend the storage life of a seed by lowering the temperature of the seed. For every 5 degrees below 50, it adds a year to storage. But a seed is kind of like a baby in a box with a lunch. It only has so much energy stored within it to be able to stay shelf stable. But you store them dry, dark, cool, and it will surprise you. Most of the books say corn will only store from 1 to 2 years. I've had it store 7 at a minimum. So it's one of those you learn as you go, and just record keeping. If you're going to be saving seeds, it's one of the most important things is record keeping. To keep notes on where the seed you got, where it came from originally. Did you buy it from a seed catalog? Did you get it from a friend? The name of that friend, where it was grown, the year it was grown, any story, if they got it from somebody else, if it had been passed down from a family, if it was an indigenous tribal seed, any history that you can get to keep that to go forward with those. Weather and conditions while you're growing it. Did you have a drought that year? Did the seeds do really well and the plants thrive even though you had a drought? Or if it was an extra wet season, did they survive anyway? Those types of things are important to note with the seed. What growing methods? Was it organic? Did you add anything to the soil? And then as you keep those, if you give them to somebody or somebody's asking you about this type of seed and you share them, then you've got that information to help them with growing. So it's really important to keep that. Let me see which. Okay, I would like to get out of this for the moment. Well, I gotta stop screen sharing. There we go. Well, we won't do it that way. We'll do it this way. Things to think about. What are your thoughts for seeds as commodities? The fact that they're being sold, the fact that they're being patented. What are your greatest fear around seeds? Last year, I know a ton of people who couldn't find seed to plant when they wanted to plant gardens because all of a sudden, everybody was wanting to garden. We'd always wanted them to learn how to garden and to start gardening and help support their communities and their families with healthy food, but we didn't exactly expect it to happen all at once with the pandemic. What do you think about future of seeds? There are a lot of activities going on around seed rematriation, which is finding those old varieties that were traditionally grown by tribes all around the country, including tribes up in this area, to reclaim those seeds as part of their sovereignty and the right to grow them and to say what happens to them and to be stewards of those seeds and to learn how to bring them back into production so we're eating more of our traditional foods. What do you think of the genetic modification and studies on seeds? And what does seed democracy mean? Everybody sharing equally, or somebody being able to sell it, or should it be a commodity at all? And how do you act from a place of being proactive? Grow your garden and save seeds. That's the most proactive you can be in the easiest form of resistance, is to grow seeds and be able to feed yourself and help feed your community as you go. And how do we maintain our seeds, the health of them and the vitality? By learning about them and being able to share that knowledge on how to grow them and how to be in a relationship with them. And to honor the seeds for all they continue to give. They're a most abundant gift from the earth. And working with seeds is slow work. It's a lifetime. And the value of a well-maintained seeds increases over time. Be ever adaptable and flexible and willing to listen to learn, and invest only as much as you can afford to lose. You know, don't go crazy trying to grow everything and save seed from everything, because you'll wind up not getting seed from anything. There's always next season. Keep good records and expect the unexpected. There are relatives. Listen to the seeds and let them teach you. Teach our children to love and respect this source of life. Seeds want to be respected, carried, and to share their gifts with us. Seeds grow exponentially. One grows to 100. They just keep multiplying and multiplying. So don't give in to there's a shortage. Only if we don't grow them and save them. Start with one seed, learn all about that plant, and then add another one. Share them with your family and your community and your neighbors. Share your knowledge of growing seeds with your neighbors. Be a part of a community seed group. Help start a community seed library, or help build a community seed bank. And now if I can figure out how to get out of my, here we go. Stop. I'm out of there. Now if I can get back. There we go. All right, I figured it out. Some of the things I talked about in there. We have a corn condom. You can purchase these, and they do. You can also get them so that you can just put your silverware in it and store it in the drawer. I remember going to restaurants that had the silverware in these. And then there's it looks like a regular paper bag for a tassel, but it's waxed and water resistant so that you don't get rain into your, and you put it over there and you fold it up at the top and staple it so that the pollen doesn't come out. Let's see if I can get 2 books. One called The Seed Garden, and an older version. It's called Seed to Seed. They will give you a lot of information on each particular crop, isolation distance, the number of plants that you would need to grow, to just grow for your garden, or if you wanted to maintain diversity. They talk about a minimum of 25 plants. If you don't have that kind of space, get together with a couple of your neighbors who are growing the same plant. As you harvest your seeds, put them all together or swap, so that the next year you have seed from your neighbor to go with your seed, and you can also maintain diversity in that way. Whereas you're swapping a portion of your seed out with other people so that you've got that mixture for a more diverse seed. Grow your plants in any kind of container you can. My sidewalk is usually lined with 5-gallon buckets with various tomatoes and peppers and broccoli and cauliflower. And you don't have to save seed from every plant. Pick one plant or one variety that you like, or if you're growing green beans, which is the easiest one in the world to grow, leave 2 or 3 plants at the end there. Let them be your seed plants. Eat the rest of them and let those just stay on the plant until the season is over and they're starting to yellow, and you'll have seed for next year from those. And if everybody did that, who's in the Gitigaan club, you'd have enough so that you could pass them out to everybody on the reservation who wanted to grow seed, wanted to grow green beans. That's part of that community seed collective that you don't depend on the grocery store or Walmart or the seed catalog, or you might just want your seed and they'll be out. So I see that Chuck says, are the dates on the seed packages valid? If it's a reputable company, they should be, because they are packed for that season. So you should be able to trust it. They do their germination tests, and so that they know how many seeds they need to put in each package to give you a fair amount, and how many out of that package they expect to germinate. So they test them every season. Erica wanted to see some of my seeds that I've got. This one is a Croatian soup bean. It was given to me by a lady who was gifted it. A friend of hers family has grown it for generations. And the only thing they know about it was they called it Croatian soup bean, and it came over from Croatia. I have yet to be able to identify it any more than that, although I've been trying.
Does it taste good, Mary? Is it like when it grows, is it a
Yes.
pretty unique looking bean?
Yes, it's smaller. It's a small red dried bean, and it is excellent in soups. And I suppose you could put in chilies and bean salads if you wanted to cook it, but it stores well. It seems to survive just about any conditions that we get up here. It's really prolific. And so, okay, we can see, if you can see this one. I don't know if the color's good for you, but this is walking green corn that I grew last year. And actually, it's a Mexican variety, and it fared better than a northern variety corn when we had that late frost. Didn't hurt it a bit. These three are Bear Island Flint corn, which is a native to this area and all the way up into Canada. And the original seed that started from this one came out of the USDA seed bank in Iowa. And it was collected from Bear Island at Leech Lake way back and put into the seed bank. And so now they've been working with it and tried to revitalize it, because it started with only a handful of about 9 or 10 seeds. And so people have been working with it and trying to get it back and healthy again, and build that population. And anyone who wants some this year, I have a gallon jar full that I grew last year. So it will be available to you guys if you want it. Along with the Croatian soup beans, that's what I grow them for, is to take and share with everybody. I have these little guys here. They're rattlesnake peppers, hot peppers or chili peppers. Not a real hot, kind of a mild chili pepper. And the original seed came from Mexico. So they do pretty good here too. Surprisingly enough. They get about 12 inches long. I have this seed. I don't know if you can see it if I hold it still enough. That's broccoli. It's Waltham broccoli. And when I planted my broccoli plants, I got the original seed from Territorial Seed Company. And when I planted, 3 of my plants bolted to seed right away. They didn't form heads. They were starting to form heads, and the next day they were flowers. And so I just let them go and saved the seed from it. So I have that as well. See, what else do I have up here? I have black turtle beans as well from last year that I grew to save for seed. Beans are easy. You just leave them on the plant. And as they start to turn yellow and dry out on the plant, you can pick the pods at that stage and spread them out so where they can get air circulation in the shade, not in the sun, and until they finish drying out to the point where you can shell them. Dried beans are really, really easy. And your actual green beans are the same way. You just leave them on the plants until they start to harden up. Here's the walking green corn. I have a gallon jar of that too. If anybody's interested in seed from that, I will gladly pass it along.
Mary, is
Yes.
the corn, Sue Connor was wondering, some of the corn, pretty colored corn, like how would you eat that? How would you like corn on the cob or?
Most of your Flint and flour corns, you can eat off the cob if you get them before they fully reach maturity at the milk stage, before they start to fully color out. They can be eaten like corn on the cob. Otherwise, you dry them down and you either grind them to flour or you make, some of them are popcorn, or I happen to like grits. So I will be grinding mine into not real fine, kind of a medium grind for that. But most of the things that we grew historically were, you ate some of them fresh, but a lot of them were foods that you could dry and store for over the winter to help supplement the food over the winter. So it was a lot of dried beans. It was a lot of winter squash that they cut into pieces and dried for over the winter to reconstitute, or really long keeping once you harden them off type squash. So you can get some heirloom variety sweet corns. These corns, even if you eat them at an early stage, will not be sweet like the corns you have today, because they've been bred for sugar content. The newer varieties that you have, these varieties of corn have a high protein count. Bear Island Flint has like a 12% protein. They've tested it, whereas most of your corns nowadays have a really high sugar content and like a 3% protein. So they're better than, and they have a corn flavor. They don't taste like sugar. They taste like corn, which is a big difference. So the thing that you dry seeds on. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, what I dry my seeds on is a paper plate. And this little thing up here is a piece of painter's tape. Always mark your paper towel, your parchment paper is good. Paper plates, a glass plate. Mark it when you put the seeds on it, because you might have just a few seeds and you'll think, oh, I remember. You won't remember. I still have seeds in paper bags that I'm glad I marked from last fall. So painter's tape is your friend. Then you can just peel it off and reuse it for the next one. And there are a lot of, oh, I know what I wanted to show you. Here's one of those little blossom bags. It's organza, really fine, so the insects can't get through it. And it just has a little piece of string through it that you draw it up and have your little bag over it. I have actually used them on squash blossoms as well to tie them closed, but they don't stay on very well. So what else? What's the next question somebody has?
Going back to one from
saving Yeah.
Nope. Sorry, Mary. Back to one from Kristen. So Kristen's wondering, aside from things we can do in our own backyards, what can we do to help protect seed sovereignty from capitalism? Are there good campaigns to give our attention, energy, or resources to?
What a wonderful segue into something that I wanted to talk about at the very end. Fond du Lac is working on a seed sovereignty assessment as well as food sovereignty because they go hand in hand. And I'm sure Caitlin, Erica, Philip Savage, myself would be just thrilled at anybody who wanted to help with that. It'll be talking to different people, finding out who has seed knowledge, who already saves seeds. There'll be a survey to be filled out if you want to fill it out. And the other thing is helping to start a seed bank there. There is now space to do it. So if everybody who gets seed in the seed giveaway would save a couple of those green bean seeds or one of the other seeds that are fairly easy to do, I'm sure we could think about setting up a seed cleaning get together in the fall and give back. Because what happens if all of a sudden there aren't outside sources to get seeds from, like last year, and the rest can't order them? So the conversation is getting ready to get started. Get a hold of Caitlin, get a hold of Erica, get a hold of myself. Your suggestions, how you think it should work, any input, any help would be greatly appreciated. Grow your own seeds, learn about it, learn within your own family, not to depend outside of it. That's the first step. So. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Well, that explains that. I think that's my first time doing that for a while. Okay, quick question. Can you start beans in the house or just sow them directly in the ground? And then I think Joyce has her hand up. So she could be.
Don't start them in the house. Just sow them directly in the ground. If they're green beans, fresh eating beans, then they're generally a short enough season that you don't want, they'll get too tall and the roots will get cramped and then they'll get stunted and they won't get a healthy start. Same thing with cucumbers and squash. And Joyce had a question.
Well, I was just wondering, this would be for Jamie or Erica. Do we have a grinder or a mill at the new cannery?
So one is ordered, just because of shipping and getting it. It's not here yet. It has been ordered, but it's somewhere in the shipping process. To my knowledge, I don't think it's here yet. But it'll be a mill that you could do, I believe you could do corn in it. You could grind wild rice in it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and we have a minute or two. Oh, hey, Deb. Yeah.
Hi,
Hi,
Deb.
my chat's not working. I tried to ask a few questions, so I just want to jump in here before I forget. And that is about the, could I get an email list of those heirloom seed sources Mary talked about in the beginning?
Erica?
Yes,
Do you have?
Sorry, Mary. Yes,
It's okay.
I have a list of some companies. They have a lot of open pollinator seeds.
Okay. I thought was there local sources around here though? Anybody?
Not that I'm aware of. There are some startup companies looking at it. There's one up the North Shore. It's called North Circle Seeds,
Where's
and
that
they have a
from?
web page. That's Zachary Page, who used to work at White Earth with their seed saving program. He's
Okay.
got his own farm now.
Oh, which town would that be by then? Like North?
I don't remember, but if you go to his webpage,
Okay.
it'll tell you where his farm is.
Okay, thank you.
And they do all heritage varieties.
Well, oh, miigwech.
You can also check with White Earth. They have the ability through their seed library, or they used to sell seeds.
Okay.
Small packets. Not a lot here, but there are some reputable companies that are on the same parallel. They're in the Northern Hemisphere.
Mhm.
Territorial Seed, Pine Tree Garden Seed, Fedco. Seed Savers Exchange is also another good. They're a trusted source because when they say that they're organically grown, they've checked it out.
Okay.
And I just wanted to note from the chat, since I'm not sure you're seeing that, Deb, but it looks like Indigenous First at ICO is selling North Circle seeds in the store. You said, Ivy? Yeah, okay. And then, let's see. And then Deb had some other suggestions, the local Duluth Public Library, First Foods Farm and Seeds.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and then we are past 6:30 here. So I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. And note that. Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing all of your knowledge.
Oh,
I love working with
you're
seeds
welcome.
because the stories they carry, and then the relationship building you were talking about with our human and non-human relatives. So I'm so grateful you took time with us this evening.
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, it was great to be here.
And thanks everyone for coming this evening
Miigwech.
too. Really
Miigwech.
appreciate you.
I have an announcement.
Oh, thank you, Erica. Sorry, we had a lot of questions at the end there, but if folks have a second, Erica wanted to talk about Thursday classes in April.
Yes.
Go for it.
Yeah. So the producer training program has scheduled a lot of classes, and then so some of the classes they're more focused on farming are in Thursdays in April, and the flyer is up there, or email me or call me if you have any questions or you want to register. I usually send the link 2 days before the class, so on Tuesdays. Everybody is welcome, everybody is invited, even if you are a very small gardener. And then also a quick announcement for the producer training program. I have seeds package for you. Just let me know when you want it to meet to give you seeds. Miigwech.
Miigwech, everybody. Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, thank you again, Mary. Thank you, Erica. Thanks everyone for coming.